Hi, Lee.
Hi, how are you, Lisa?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm a bit tired, you know.
Oh,
I've got increased my energy today.
Why? What have you been up to?
We went to see the recording of Gladiators yesterday.
Oh my God, were you in it?
Well, I would have loved to have been. I'm not sure those outfits would suit me, to be fair. And I'm not sure I've got the muscles to fill them.
But you're trying. You are trying.
What a show. What a show. It took a long time to film and edit. A bit like this, to be fair. Not quite as long, but yeah, it was magical. And you know, the most special thing was going with Ella and spending some really quality daddy-daughter time. That was the magical thing.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I'd like to go and see them. Maybe for different reasons. But
No, I was gonna say, I'm not
for the
like
outfits.
seeing Sabre and Diamond did not disappoint. Or Comet, all the other actually, it was just amazing athletes performing.
Yeah, amazing. We'll probably learn a lot. Hopefully, we can get an interview one of them.
Oh, now that's a challenge, isn't it?
Are they on the Beeb?
They are, because it's a BBC gladiator show.
Well, there we go. That's a challenge for you. I've had an interesting week this week as well. Yeah, you talked about Ella. I've had a few mums contact me, talk to me this week about the world of work and the world of business, and what does it mean to be able to do it all. And then I told them the real reality, like the messy reality. But I think that's good. We kind of resonated and talked about. Well, actually, what we're going to talk about in a minute, the world of change and how do we get into that. So it was really good to kind of connect with other mums who are trying to make it all happen, especially as it's school holiday time.
Yeah, and it is tricky, isn't it? Blimey, I was 2 days in and I was like, what? In the dad's WhatsApp group going, literally, is this the pandemic all of a sudden? I was all set up and then all of a sudden my will was thrown because she wasn't doing clubs or classes for 2 days.
That's it. I mean, it happens every year, but it's still shocking.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
I should be getting better.
Planned. No. So shall we say why we're here? Why are you here? What is this? We better introduce the podcast.
This is the latest edition of Leadership, actually. It's not love, it's leadership, actually.
We're finally getting that right. I think so.
We're
not matching the furniture today. Well, I'm not, but you are. So that's
I am.
good.
And I'm in uniform. I feel better again. I feel more complete.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. But it's not all about us because we have got a guest today, as we usually do. And I did actually say insinuated that we're going to talk a little bit about change. So we're going to talk today about the positive leader in a changing world. And we're going to talk about why today's leaders need a different approach to change, and that's been my background for a long time. So I'm really passionate about this area, and I'm really passionate about the guest that we've got today, because they're really founded in positive psychology, having personal agency, and really looking at change in a different way, in a way that really meets today's world. So without further ado, I think I'm going to invite our guest. So today's guest is a business psychologist, an author, creator of a brand new framework of change. We've worked with her a lot. She's absolutely amazing. We're both in awe of her. Rebecca Stevens, come and join us.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm very well today, actually, yes. Energised for a Friday, which is a bit unusual for me. I'm worn out by Friday.
That's good. Why? What's made you energised?
I think I've just been doing a lot of work which energises me this week rather than work that drains me, so that always helps my week.
Wow, I think we'll dive into it.
It's still a little bit summery. So.
Yeah, it is, definitely. So we normally, on the podcast, introduce a bit of a topic and talk about where we've experienced some of the messy bits, I guess, so the messy bits of change, and invite you in to go, does this resonate? And then we'll dive into a little bit more about why we've invited you today and kind of explore some of the stuff that you're going to bring in terms of change, if that's all right.
Okay.
But Lee, I'm going to ask you. In your background, I guess you've been in the world of change a lot, leading through change as well as a leader in that space. How's it been, and what's been your ups and downs in that?
Yeah, like people listening to this will know it, right? Because it is messy, it is hard. You think that you'll get the objectives or something, you'll figure out how you're going to measure something, and then you get to the end of it, and sometimes there's just a gut feel that you've not quite landed it, or you feel like you've got everything right and every metric's hit, but then 3 months down the line, you're either changing it all again, or it didn't quite go as you had planned or thought it would because you've gone on to the next project. So I really worked harder. I think we overcomplicate stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
You know, I once remember looking at a pie chart at work or a vision statement for the year of what we were going to prioritise. And I remember seeing at least 34 things on that list.
34?
Yeah. To this day, if you look back, you'd be going, I think that's quite a lot to remember, or where do I fit into that? So I think the simpler that you can make it, in my experience, my learning has been, the better it can be.
Yeah.
To really go, like, it's not the next thing, because people get change fatigue. You hear that all the time, don't you?
Totally.
And I've definitely been guilty as a leader to go, we've done that, we're now going on to the next thing, and people are still catching up with what was the original thing that we were changing.
That's it. Can't keep up. And the pace of change is so fast. I guess for me, being in the world of change, and we'll talk about that, Rebecca, often people want to put the big change in, so they put in a big system change, or they put in a new way of being, but they think, well, that'll do it. That'll make people, be different, behave different, understand the world differently, and it doesn't. You've got to do a lot to help people understand that the change they're part of, to believe in it, to understand their purpose, their role in it, and then as leaders, you've got to take all that and then help shift other people through that. And it can be really, it can be messy. It can take a long time if we don't do it in the right way. So yeah, it's not an easy feast, but I think if you can do it at the pace of your people, then things can be different, and you get better results.
I do love that, right? And because one thing that really kind of, I guess, resonates with me is you have the plan, you have the business case. I often think about hearts and minds of the people that you're trying to kind of navigate this change through, and often we don't even think about them in the journey, or the customer experience, or the employee experience that you go through, or the customer experience. You often think, well, what's the process? So I'm a big believer in hearts and minds, or the arts and science of change, and I always think there's kind of a play-off between the two. So yes, there's the process, but what does it mean to people? How will they experience this? What will it look like differently? And I don't think we do enough in that space, because we're so prone to get something out or to do it. Like, take this podcast for an example. Right, it's not necessarily been perfect from the get-go, but we've launched something and we'll iterate it and we'll make changes.
Yes, lots.
You're not in your uniform today. You've changed that. You can't find it. You see, that's changing.
No. I think my fans have run off with it.
But it's like, I have to wear this uniform now. I feel whole and complete again, the fact I've gone back.
You're looking great.
Thank you.
Well, not to distract Rebecca.
I got the memo about the colour, but not the uniform. Sorry,
You're on point, honestly. You're on point.
So through all our ramblings that we just said, does any of that resonate, in terms of some of the challenges, and maybe why we'll dive into why this is an area of passion for you, but does some of that resonate?
Yeah, totally. And I guess there's a few things there I want to kind of highlight, was things like the use of the word fatigue, the use of the word pace. You also mentioned the word end and messy. And what I find interesting is how those are relatively negative words, and that negative perspective of what change brings. And one of the things that got me really thinking about change was, why do we make the assumption that change is so negative, that we're always experiencing negatively? Because if you look at human evolution and you look at nature, we constantly evolve. Yeah. Evolution is change, and we actually love to evolve. We love new things. So it's really interesting that in business we have this concept that we've built, this construct that we've built, that change is bad, change is negative, and it's all going to be a negative reaction to it. Is it a negative reaction to the change, or is it a negative reaction to how something is being delivered? You talked about hearts and minds and that balance between art and science.
Well, I guess something that's just sprung into mind as you were speaking there, Rebecca, is what's the foundation of any change programme that they talk about in the corporate world? They bring out the Kubler-Ross change curve that's based from a negative perception around death
it was
or loss.
built around grief.
Grief. So, and therefore, if that's the basis, it's just got me thinking about that just in the moment. Is if that's the basis that we start off in, you start using words about like depression and anger. Like it's not surprising then that that's where the mindset starts. I love the fact you're bringing a different perspective that says, actually, I'm really curious around how do we make this about positive stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of psychology traditionally has been from the deficit perspective up until Martin Seligman really started thinking about why do we study what is wrong, why don't we study what is right? And he came to that kind of conclusion in the 90s and started looking at this field in a strong way and started to influence. We need to look at what is right. And I've been working with that, with strengths and with that mindset kind of since the early 2000s. And I was working with Dr. Paul Brereton, and we were looking at how do we look at outcomes, how do we look at people playing to strengths, how do we look at individualism, and people coming together and playing collectively to their strengths. And this is where, for me, the nugget around we're looking at change not quite in the best way for us now. Yeah. It's not in the wrong way. Those models that we have, Kubler-Ross, Kotter, all those models that have served us for years, just maybe don't reflect our current reality. And that's the conclusion I reached, funnily enough, just before the pandemic.
Nice, good timing. But honestly, already I'm in, because I've used all those models, and and even just thinking about it, going, well, what state are you in? You have to define what box you're in and where you are, and it's like even if they're not, then they have to name it, because they can't just get through the curve. So,
well, let me pose a question at you.
Yeah.
Do you think you can hold two emotions at the same time about the same situation?
Oh.
Two different emotions.
The way you've asked the question, no.
It's a bit leading.
Yeah. I do not believe.
The way you asked the question, I was going to say yes.
Sorry, it's an easy question. So, one of the things we know about emotions is that emotions are what we label as an emotion is actually related to our experiences, how we grew up, and how we labelled our own physiology. So one person's version of sad will be different to someone else's version of sad. And it's a lot to do with our life experiences, which is why in emotional intelligence we talk about getting broader emotional experiences and labelling those, getting better at labelling those.
Yes.
Because then you can be smarter about what's going on for you. But what we also know is that in a situation, you can hold differing emotions at the same time about the same situation. So actually, when we look at Kubler-Ross's model, and she says this herself, that it's a bit like a washing machine.
Yes.
You will actually go through all those emotions, and some people will process those emotions in different ways and faster and slower. It's not necessarily linear. The linear element was to simplify the model and to make it useful,
yes,
and to try and bring some kind of average journey into it. But if we look at it from the perspective of emotions, that means we could be experiencing all those emotions in that moment when we're facing into change. So therefore, again, if we're trying to think sequentially, human beings aren't sequential, not really. We use sequential methods and tools,
yes,
because it's a way of helping us structure our environment, and it's a way of bringing predictability in a way of, it's useful, isn't it? I'll
yes,
do this and then I'll do that. But actually, we're not very sequential in how we experience things. So for me, change models are a little overly focused on process, even those that have the softer elements in them. And I've been studying change models for years and using them for years, and not enough focused on how complicated it is as a human being. We've oversimplified the human experience. In my mind's eye, which is why when I'm there and kind of before the pandemic, working with leaders who are trying to think about change, and I'm thinking I can't use this model. I mean, or that model. That none of these models work because they're not helping this person through what is really complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is change is constant.
Wow.
It doesn't have an end.
No, it definitely doesn't. I think that's a good segue into tell us a bit more about what you created that is different to some of those models out there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go overly about the model. The model really kind of came from my experience as a practitioner and wanting to support, through my coaching, through leadership coaching and one-to-one coaching, wanting to support people in a better way. And thinking, so as a psychologist, I often bring in things to help people understand what might be going on for them.
Yes.
That might be outside of the coaching session, of course. Here's something that might help you understand what's happening. But it can really help people to go, okay, that gives me an idea. And it starts to put ideas in as to what they could do next. And that's where the gap was for me. So I started to think about, so I was using the strengths piece and thinking about collective outcomes and playing to strengths. I was also looking a lot at the time at outcomes, because if you start to look at strengths in a kind of recruitment kind of context, you look at, right, how do they deliver that outcome with their strengths? So you have this very individualized approach to outcomes can be delivered in different ways by different people.
Yeah.
We kind of know that intuitively, but trying to put that into a recruitment process is quite hard.
Yeah.
So I was working a lot with those, and then I started to think about the learning piece, the growth mindset, and Carol Dweck's work about learning.
Love Carol. Sorry.
Do you know her?
Her work.
Her work.
Yeah, her work.
Oh, it's great. It's great. And this piece around, if you look at things from that perspective of, okay, what is the opportunity here? How could I learn from this scenario? And, for me, it really interesting. I put myself through a personal growth mindset experience because I was emerging from the pandemic with a very fixed mindset. I was finding it really hard, like most people.
Yeah.
And I decided, as part of my learning about Carol's work and growth mindset, I had to experience it. And I decided I was going to learn ukulele. This is back in 2021. And I was going to perform on stage, which terrified me, believe me. I get really bad stage fright. And it took me a year, and I did.
Wow.
I did it. And now I'm performing in a band, and I perform fairly regularly.
Phenomenal.
And all from that moment of, I've got to challenge myself, because I want to experience what it's like to take something that you know you're not very good at, that you might fail at, that you're going to fail publicly at fairly frequently, and believe me, you don't want to hear my version of Sinead's Nothing Compares to You, which might have been a bit of a brave choice.
I'm glad I just mime that then, because in my head I played that. Everyone who knows me knows I would definitely sing that in karaoke.
Yeah, well, we're going to do
pretty hard. I'm a bit more Annie Lennox in the singing, so I've cracked some of Annie Lennox's work. But yeah, it's and going through that experience and really understanding what Carol meant by growth mindset, that it's this constant journey. And I started to plug this in, and at the same time, I had been working very closely with leaders in the tech sector, and they talked to me a lot about Agile, and I was getting familiar with Agile. And I was like, I love this thinking, I love this iterative approach.
Yeah.
I can really see where they're coming from. There's this very test and learn, and this was all coming together. Test and learn. Don't be afraid to fail, but do it fast.
Yes.
And change. And a real agility in it. But there's agility in their process and decision making rather than organisation. So there's this kind of, well, we haven't made that decision before, but give it a go and see what it does.
Yeah.
So that part started to come into my thinking and really heavily influenced me. And that's when it really came together, was those experiences and starting to look at, and David Co-Creation was like, and Keith as well, were kind of, well, what does this look like? What's this thinking about? And I said, well, in my mind's eye, all these different aspects are really important. And actually Keith was doing some work on leadership at the time, and we were talking a lot about leading in a human way, being vulnerable, being having human-led decisions, and communicating really clear purpose as a leader, because we didn't know the answers. This is the bit that we really saw in 2020 was, I haven't done this before.
Yeah.
No. No one's done this before, unless you were alive during the Spanish flu. No one's done this before. It's okay. You don't have to have the answers. Your team will collectively be able to find the answers.
Yeah.
You have to believe in them. You have to inspire them. You have to get them together. You have to get them to play to strengths. You have to get them to really understand it's okay that no one actually knows the answer, because you'll find an answer. And when you take into that space, so you've got the leader there with this, right, we need to try and do this, that overall purpose. You're the answer in this business, so how as the leader do I enable you to come together, play to your strengths? I don't restrain you in terms of decisions. I give you guidelines and principles to work with.
Yeah.
So here are our company kind of principles rather than rules. And I encourage you to try something and fail and learn from it, and we'll do something different. Now, businesses that were taking that approach, and that took a real brave approach. I had leaders saying to me, but that's really vulnerable. I'm meant to have the answer.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to have the answer. You have to be really good with your people. Really understand them, really understand what helps them come together and helps them work. And that is the representation of the model. I then kind of went, okay, how does this come together? So that focusing on purpose, that being very human-centric, that what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? How do we do that collectively? How do we make sure we're agile in all of this? And where is the learning in all of this? How do we make sure we're encouraging people to have a learning mindset?
And genuinely, like, there's so much that resonates with that. And actually, when we had Chris Brindley on a previous episode, he very much advocated for a business psychologist to come in and to work with on a quarterly basis, to then really get under the skin actually of organisations. But he also talked about having a myopic focus about his people. Like he said, he was relentless at understanding and knowing his people birthdays, what motivated them, what ticked them off. And I was like, that's so inspiring for such a senior leader, and it echoes everything that you're saying. So, and also what you do on a daily basis, and I guess the value that organisations can have from that. I love to hear as a leader that I don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah, I was going to say what shifted in the leader, but that's why, that how freeing is that to go, well, you don't have to have all the answers.
Well, maybe I've got a chance, that's what I mean.
Yeah, you've got a chance now.
There is this assumption that you have to have done everybody's job.
Yeah.
Now, bear in mind, you only need to have to look at the tech sector and why Agile came around to understand that actually often you haven't done everyone's job, and often you couldn't. The people that work for you are better than you. But you're the enabler, you're the person that brings them together, that makes sure they're being collective rather than running off in silos in different directions. You're the person helping them find that purpose. So purpose, of course, the concept of purpose has been around for a really long time.
Yes.
And it's in, obviously, Martin Seligman's model of PERMA, which is a great kind of personal model for change. But purpose is like the really inner guiding light, and it's the place to start. It's what is our overall purpose, because if there's any form, so I often work with people, teams who are in conflict.
Yes.
And you just keep going up and up and up until you find the common purpose, because once you've found that common purpose, it becomes more obvious what to do and what not to do, and where your decisions should go. But you don't need detail in the purpose. It can be quite it can be quite kind of big and out there and just kind of a vision. And then it's really helping people kind of connect with that personally. How does that sit with them? Where does that fit for them?
Yes.
And once you've got that, it means things like the principles for our decisions become a bit more obvious, because if that's our purpose, that decision is more aligned with that purpose.
Absolutely.
So you can give a bit more freedom within those kind of guidelines. So if that's our purpose, does that decision that you're making align with that or not? Does that risk you're taking align with that or not? So you can start to help people really understand what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And actually, when you start to then bring in that strengths piece about it's okay that you're not good at everything, and but you really, really need to know what you're good at so you can play to those, because we need those and we need you to really kind of hone in on those and give yourself time and space to work with those. Then you've got people starting to think about, well, we need to do that. Actually, I'm not the right person for that.
Yeah.
Rather than people trying to compete in terms of egos and light and visibility, and but that takes quite a lot of humility to go, I'm not very good at that, I'm going to ask someone else to do that.
Yeah,
so you have to, but the leader is the person who's the role model in that. So.
Yeah, and sometimes we broad brush in change. I've seen that, a lot in the when we're going through change, we want some consistency, we want to measure it, we want to see things, move and progress, as and we often target a big population and go, right, we've got to try and get all these people through, and so that's a very different way of looking at it, but actually can accelerate. I could see how it could accelerate if you've got a very purposeful change, that you're iterative and you're agile, and that you've got the right people doing the right roles, or they're working to their strengths, and they're moving those elements forward. I can see that could really accelerate where things go.
Yeah, so it's interesting the word iterative that you use, because here's the thing, there's never an end to change, there's never an end.
Mm.
We work in a world which is changing constantly. Technology is really at pace, our society is changing at pace. So if we made the assumption there is never an end to change, how could we look at it differently that is more helpful for us?
Wow.
Iteration. And this is where that agile methodology thinking is coming from. So if we think about that from a leader perspective, and we don't think in permanencies, actually then we can start to think, okay, this is the iteration. So you talked about change fatigue. Fatigue comes from a lack of control, it comes from a lack of understanding, it comes from not feeling bought in, it comes from some of those emotions not having space to be on the table.
Yeah.
Actually, if we give space for all of that, if we have involvement, if emotions are allowed, if I can sometimes be really angry about that thing that's being introduced, but share that and understand it and help make changes, then it's not fatigue anymore. You don't get that kind of element going on. You get this kind of excitement, energy, evolution, and that feeling of it's okay, rather than the kind of it's not psychologically safe, which is what leads to the fatigue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I've been in IT in technology companies, and you can be. I've been wedded to a piece of software or a process you love, and and you kind of go, shortcuts my brain, simple human being. I want to keep doing this stuff, and then version 2 comes out, you're like, oh my gosh, like not again. And and there's other things that I go, I really love this stuff. It's going to make my life easier, so I'm all over it. And like you say, it's a positive thing, and I love it. And I'm just curious around, like, where do we decide, like, what lights us up and we're all, like, a change catalyst, I think is a phrase that's often used, versus something you go, absolutely no chance I want to keep wedded to that stuff, because that's my bread and butter.
I can relate to that. I'm resisting a computer update. And it's so we are as human beings pattern recognition machines. Our brains are taking in a lot of information, so when things are similar, it's a lot easier, it's a lot less wasteful in terms of energy. So that is why we have an inclination towards something familiar. When because of that, it's an energy reduction piece. So it feels kind of familiar, feels safe, it's not using energy, so I don't have to think about it, or I don't have to learn a new way of working with my computer. However, we actually notice how we're never quite satisfied with anything. We're always fiddling about with things. Who makes a recipe, for example, the same every time? You might start the same at the beginning, but then later on you're like, I might add a bit of pepper, or I might, do you know what, I think it needs a bit more basil, or and it's the same with, hang on a minute, I've just discovered I could do something different in this software. So sometimes it's to do with this, the how big is the gap that you're jumping.
Yeah.
So you need to understand for yourself what is your appetite in all of that. Is it a big jump? Therefore, what can you do to look at this from a different perspective? So in terms of a new piece of software, is it going and having a look at someone else using it and understanding why it's got something better than what you've got, or understanding what's different, what you're going to be losing, before you leap into this new software on a busy work day when you've got not enough time to even process it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
what is it that you need to help make that change, to help make that evolution? Because everyone is always tweaking their lives in one way or another. So we do want to change, but it comes back to that word of pace. It's a little bit different for everyone.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's because of our life experiences, sometimes that's our personality. Our pace might be a little bit different. So how do we help people understand what helps them change as an individual, and therefore what do they need to do from a growth mind perspective to engage with it? What is it they need? And rather than make assumptions about what they need.
You've honestly, so much resonates. I think you're keeping us a bit of a tease about what your model is.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what your model is and what it stands for.
So the model is called FHOCAL, and it stands for representing change through an evidence-based positive psychology approach. I would say it's a model that's been curated. I have been inspired by all sorts of different psychologists and researchers and papers and publications and work I've been using, like Harold Dweck's, and kind of pulled it together because nothing existed. And I did phone a friend, going around going, does anything exist? And looked around, looked at what was in the positive psychology field, and then nothing really existed. So I pulled it all together and went, right, these are the 6 elements I think we really need to focus on. And it's not a sequence, everything needs to be in place at the same time. So FHOCAL stands for, you need a focus on purpose.
Nice.
So what is our purpose as an organisation, and for me as an individual? How do I find alignment? Then the H is the human-centred. So how are we making sure as an organisation we're keeping people involved and making decisions that balance the head and the heart? So this is back to something you started with earlier. And as an individual, how am I making sure I'm contributing into that, not staying a silent kind of victim? The O is outcomes. So what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? We might all get there differently, but what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And what does that look like for customers, for end users, for what is it? And that should have a strong alignment with purpose, of course. So that's where your kind of measurement metrics would be. It's not input, it's outcomes.
Yes. Yeah, very important, different.
Yeah. And then the C is obviously collective. So this is how are we playing to our collective strengths. As an organisation, do I know what those are? As a manager, do I not know what my team strengths are? As an individual, this is where kind of just going, I don't know, doesn't work, that doesn't wash. As an individual, you should take agency and responsibility for knowing your strengths and being able to talk about that and being able to come in and go, I'm great at that, not so great at that, so this is where I need to play.
Love that.
And this person who's good at this is who I need to be playing with, because if together it'll be better. So, and as a manager, you have to help people be vulnerable in that piece, because it's vulnerable to saying what you're not good at, because we have this kind of thinking that we need to be all-rounders.
Or what you're good at. Sometimes that can feel vulnerable as well, to say, I'm really good at that,
True, because then there's expectations.
Yeah, so both, isn't it?
Keep coming back to you for the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's the other thing, is sometimes strengths can be overplayed. So understanding when you might have burnt out because you've used it a bit too much, it's been exhausting. Because being in that strength zone is a very, very absorbing place. You'll know the work around flow and how we get into that zone, but it does use a lot of energy. So you need to have, that's why the self-awareness is key. And then of course we have the agility piece. So how are we making sure our decision-making processes are operating around principles rather than rule books?
Yeah.
So it's almost working with it's coming up with, okay, in these kind of situations, these are the principles I want you to follow. If it's, for example, customer first, so you might use your values to inform your principles.
Yes.
If it's customer first and we've got a customer complaint, how do we make sure that customer first is the principle we've got in our mind's eye when we're trying to solve that situation? And you're giving people ownership of those principles. And then, of course, the L is the learning and the growth mindset piece. How, as an organisation, are we helping people feel okay to have a growth mindset? How are we encouraging that? And as an individual, again, this is around as an individual. So growth mindset is a state, it's not a trait. It changes. Our context or people or situations can trigger us into a fixed mindset for the best of us. And it's getting smart at recognising where you might be. Why might have you been triggered into a fixed mindset? And it's being able to go from that emotional intelligence piece, stop. Okay, I'm having a fixed mindset reaction. Why might that be? What's been triggered here? How can I turn this into that path of possibility, that growth mindset reaction? What are the opportunities here? How do I turn that round and look at and reframe? This is where you do a lot of kind of cognitive reframing. But you need people to kind of own that. There's only so much you can do as an organisation with some of this. If you need people to meet you in that, and they need to feel that it's safe to be in that learning space as well. So that's kind of how it came together, and I wish on about it a little bit.
I love it. I wish I'd known you years ago.
That's
that
the
model.
thinking. Yeah,
it's great thinking. It's not really a model. It's like a framework for being in change.
Yeah, it's like a curated framework.
Yeah,
is
I
actually
love
what
that.
I'd probably call it.
And bringing it, I love the fact that ends on the growth mindset is a state, a state of mind that that's changeable with whatever is going on. And bringing this back to, I guess, our leaders out there, there's lots of things to consider in that. There's so much that we could spend hours talking about. I could, and I will. But if so as a leader we go, as a leader who might be going through change and being asked to lead through that change, what do you think might be a good starting point for them in all of that? Where would they start?
Yeah, I think the most accessible starting point, which is kind of what led me into all of this, was the collective piece. What are my strengths as a leader? And how do I get really comfortable with those? And what are the strengths of each of the individuals on my team? And if that's the only thing you do, that makes a big difference, I've noticed. So this is because that's where I started with leaders, was let's look at this before I had done all this thinking. And that can make a huge difference because you've got this acceptance, but this is where you start to see high performing teams come together because they've worked out how they work well together.
Yes.
And they play to that. So even if everything else, even if they're working in an organisation which is kind of a bit lost on its way, it's got all these rules and bureaucracy, it's a bit averse to risk, it's a bit kind of financial led. We know a lot of organisations which are very financial led. If you and your team are working to your strengths, you can actually succeed through those environments. So that is the starting point, and then kind of working on everything else and trying to influence the culture around you.
Can I ask one question on that? So again, so many examples, like that's what I do and have done with teams particularly, both in conflict and out of conflict, high performing. What then, when that team changes, so one person leaves or someone joins, Tell us a little bit then how you maintain, build, carry that forward, because often it's been altered slightly.
It's definitely altered. Yes. Yeah, I think sometimes we underestimate that as well. We underestimate the loss and grief we might have from the loss of whoever's left, or even sometimes that might be cheers. But and a new person coming in, we don't know that. Yeah. This is where you've built a team culture in this strengths way. This is where things like having a conversation about expectations with that individual. This is how we do things around here. This is how we work as a team. Help us understand you. So it's drawing someone in by showing them the kind of playbook to this team and then living that. It's not just kind of going, oh yeah, we you know, one of the things that's really important is we respect each other, and respect is not calling people on the weekends, and then breaking that principle that you've put in place. So if that's part of your culture, one of the things is we're always available to support each other. That might mean we call each other on the weekends occasionally, but it's okay. If you're too busy, just say.
Yeah.
It's having honest expectation conversations very early on, and I would do that during the recruitment process, not once they're hired. So your recruitment processes need to be reflective of the culture of the team they're joining, because obviously team culture can be different to an organisation culture. Then in those early onboarding days, it's around having really solid conversations about, we often call that the psychological contract, having really honest conversations about expectations. Both ways. This is not just the manager going, I expect this of you. This is the person going, well, I've joined this organisation, I'm really keen to, I don't know, develop, manage, whatever it is they're really enthusiastic about. And then helping the team understand that person too. That has to happen really early, so they can start to make those connections themselves as well.
I love that, because what I was thinking was, how do you have people that are culture add rather than culture fit?
Yes.
So how do they bring something to the table? Because that's why you've employed them in the first place.
Culture fit means you want everyone the same.
Yeah,
that's not
you
necessarily
do.
true.
Yeah, fit into our way of working because we've got it all sorted out. Whereas I come in as an individual wanting to be attracted to an organisation, bring something to the party, but I might not quite. You know,
it can be hugely challenging when you're different to other people on the team. Yeah, you join a team, you're like, oh, not quite like everyone around here, but that might be exactly why you're hired. But as a manager, if you don't share that, then that person might start to adapt themselves and go, okay, I shouldn't be like that in this space because no one else is. Yeah. I've joined and I'm, I don't know, a bit mischievous and like jokes, but everyone else around here was really serious. So I'm going to push that down.
You're the mischievous one.
I know, I think that's some of that resonates. So.
But you see how actually that might be one of the reasons the manager wants the person there. So say that.
Yeah.
It's okay. And saying to the team, you know, and it's helping, because this is the interesting piece, isn't it? When we have more diverse teams, we have more conflict. We always view conflict as something negative, but actually it's a really healthy dynamic in a team because it pushes a team to be stronger, better, think differently. But we've got to help the team to see conflict in that way and to be able to have different conversations, which means when you're bringing someone new in, especially if they're different to the rest of the team, how do you help them have those conversations where there's difference? And that's okay. Yeah. But it's the expectations piece, and then the person, so you then get that culture add going on, rather than I'm going to adjust myself to the organisation and now I feel slightly like I don't fit as the piece of jigsaw, really.
Yeah, and we could do a whole other podcast on that part, but I think that's really relevant to change, because actually, you know, we know, don't we, that if we have more diversity and inclusive teams, then it changes the way that we think about you know, the ideas that are brought into that.
Yeah, we're more resilient to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you never know what's coming.
We don't. On that note, though, I think, you know, my final kind of takeaway from that, you know, there's so much in there, but that connectivity piece and understand, if we only do one thing, that, you know, we understand our own strengths and our strengths of our people. I think that's really important. And the other, because it personally resonates, and I hear you say it a lot, is what do you need? You know, that is a really big question, you know, to be able to do this, to grow, to, you know, bring your strengths to the table. It's just an amazing, brilliant question, and makes everybody think. What about you, Lee? What's your reflections?
I think the bit you say about being intentional and being conscious about what the approach that you take, you know, being open-minded. There's something that's resonating that's just sitting there around, like, where do we meet something, like knowing ourselves first to go, I might be jaded right now and therefore I can't take on this new thing, versus and a more fit mindset, whereas actually you've got great energy, you're in a great space, and I'm open to it just for the state of being, rather than your attitude or view to it at that point. So I'm going to wrestle with that, and I love that FHOCAL model, because I think the way you've brought it to life, I can really say I can go and use that in my practice, and I'm excited to give it a go, actually. And not think of it as a logical you know, line, because I've always followed it to go stage to stage, and you've blown my mind going, well, it could be all of them all at the same time. So I've been teaching wrong probably for about 20 years. So.
Well, some things you might be doing better than others. You might have a really clear purpose, but actually a bit of a risk-averse learning context. So what is it? So it's about understanding and going, right, how have we got these 6 areas covered as a culture? What are we doing really well as? What are we doing less well as? And how do we boost those?
I love that.
Brilliant. Wow, what a great episode.
Absolutely, it's flown by.
I know, totally. But thank you
this.
so much. Thank you so much for coming, Rebecca. We're both in awe. We're in awe before
my
you
passion topic, sorry.
No, we absolutely love it. And I'm sure the listeners out there will. So do you want to wrap us up, Lee?
Yeah, just to say a huge thank you. You know, we always appreciate your time. It's the most precious gift that you have, that you've trusted us to listen to us. We'd love to hear your comments and your feedback. And if you want anyone on this podcast, we need you to let us know, because we'll do our utmost to get them on here. Give us a like, subscribe, follow, and we'll see you next time on Leadership Actually.
Thank you.